Welcome everyone to this brand new episode. It's round 4 in Series 1 and this time it's to Italy for our very first sprint race at the Imola Grand Prix. If you did miss the previous episode, I've put a link in the description below and there's also a link in the top right corner of this video, so feel free to take a look at that one. As for my thoughts on that race, well, it wasn't a great one for us, let's just put it that way. Jack stone dead last and my first DNF of the season, just a few laps away from the end of the race, and we were having such a positive race as well. P12, feeling really comfortable with the car until it all went wrong. Supposedly we are top of the durability progress chart, but I'm not really sure how much I believe that, considering we've had 2 DNFs as a team in our first 3 races. Apparently it was a mechanical issue with my gearbox, so I'm going to have to go ahead anyway and fit a new gearbox component for this race weekend. You may have also seen in the activities I decided to do a 3-day durability equipment upgrade, so let's see if that has any impact over the course of the next few races. One team that it didn't go wrong for, and that was Ferrari, as they complete their 3rd double podium in the first 3 races. A 1-2 finish for them and another win for Charles Leclerc, and this time it was a dominant win, absolutely no doubt whatsoever. He was a monster around Albert Park, and that means he extends his lead at the top of the driver standings to 29 points, and if things continue as they are, he is going to walk his way to his very first F1 title, and Ferrari are going to walk their way back to their first constructors title since 2008. So Red Bull and Mercedes really need to step it up a gear if they want to feature in this fight at all. But for us, somehow we remain 8th in the constructor standings. I think it's only a matter of time before AlphaTauri start getting points on the board, and I'm fully expecting Aston Martin to make a charge pretty soon too. So I'm not getting too excited. Aiken, well, he's not really showing any signs of scoring points either, or even getting into the top 15 for that matter, so we kind of are a one-horse race team at the moment, so trying to fight against everyone else. But I guess we do have the worst car on the grid, and he is only 67 rated at the moment, so I probably need to improve the car first and actually start investing in his stats before I can start criticising his performance, I suppose. One thing I can definitely be criticised for is I've realised I've been driving around for the last few episodes without even having my sponsor on my car. So that's a bit of a rookie mistake, and I'm surprised Xenon Dynamics haven't withdrawn their funding, to be honest, as they must have been furious with me. So I'm going to go ahead and add their logo to a few different areas of the car, and I'm just going to hope they didn't notice either. So yeah, so sorry about that, Xenon Dynamics. I hope you can accept my apology for my mistake, and I hope we can continue our positive working relationship moving forward. AKA, if you can continue giving me money, that would be great. And speaking of money, we still don't have enough money to make any more facility changes, but we do have enough R&D to make a few different upgrades. Fortunately, my rear downforce and my engine power upgrades have both come in successfully. However, a chassis weight reduction upgrade did not, so I'm going to have to repurchase that one at some point. This time, I think I'm going to go for at least one major upgrade to see if it can be a bit of a kickstart to really help us propel us up the progress standings and the grid too. So firstly, I'm going to go with a major drag reduction upgrade that should come in before Spain in a couple of races' time. Annoyingly, I did want to do the major gearbox upgrade, but I'm literally 3 R&D points off being able to do it. So bit frustrating. So instead, we'll have to settle for another engine power upgrade, which will come in before Miami, and it really is needed as we are so behind from an engine point of view in comparison to the other cars. So we really need to do something to try and claw that back. And if we look at the progress chart just before Imola, even with those 2 upgrades, I'm still behind Williams. I've brought it back slightly, but I still remain very much the bottom ranked car on the grid. Red Bull, however, I said they needed to step it up a gear, and they have. They are now top of the performance charts, and that will be music to Verstappen and Perez's ears heading into this race weekend as they look to close the standings to Charles Leclerc at the top. Mercedes getting closer too, so things could start to look a little more interesting from this weekend onwards. We shall see. And just before we can head to Imola, I'm being asked by my marketing department who I want as my rival. It's a bit annoying, as I would have liked to have had a Williams car in there, but between the 2 Astons, well, it's going to be a pretty obvious choice in Stroll. There's no way I'm going to go toe-to-toe with Vettel right now. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Lance Stroll as my new F1 rival. So here we are on to qualifying it is, and you'll see I'm on my 2nd flyer at the moment, as I did a 121 in my first, which I definitely think I can improve on. But To be honest, Imola is not one of my favourite tracks to drive on. I think it's great from a viewing point of view, but for me driving on it, when I've done a few time trials to get used to the track, I've generally struggled, so I'm not really expecting too much today, as I'll come in with a 120, so I did manage to shave off almost an entire second off the previous lap. And after the first 3 races of the season, I was feeling pretty confident with myself, and although Imola isn't my best track, I actually raised the AI level to 80, and well, I'm thinking that confidence may have been a little bit misplaced, as I am rock bottom of Q1. I'm 7/10 off my teammate, so maybe I might have to drop it back down to say 70, 75 for the sprint and see how we go. Usual suspects out of Q1, although Vettel manages to make it into Q2, so early signs that they are definitely improving, which makes me all the happier that I chose Stroll as my rival. And Guan Yu Zhou, really, he is not performing to the level that Bottas is in that Alpha. He really, really should be higher. But for us, it's the back of the row of the grid once again for the sprint, and I've got a feeling that this is going to be a tough one.
Well, the weather is not looking good today. We're expecting the downpours to continue into today's sprint. This will make for some very tricky conditions for all the teams. Off the back of a fantastic qualifying session, it's time to see how our starting grid looks for today's sprint. Sergio Perez will lead us away from pole position, edging out Max Verstappen, who'll start from P2. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Sainz, Leclerc, and Sir Lewis Hamilton, and Russell, Norris, Fernando Alonso, Ricciardo, and Esteban Ocon, Bottas, Tsunoda, Kevin Magnussen, and Mick Schumacher, Gasly, Vettel, Guan Yu Zhou, and Alex Albon, Latifi, Stroll, Aitken, and the rookie. And with preparations almost complete, let's head trackside for today's sprint.
So the 2 Red Bulls, I said they made upgrades. What an impact those upgrades have made. Red Bull 1-2 lockout with Ferrari down to 3 and 4 as it's lights out and this sprint begins, and it's not a particularly good start from me. I'm really struggling to get any sort of grip off the line, but with Stroll and my teammate fighting down the first straight, I am going to cut to the inside and hopefully try and make the move on Stroll. I'm going to try and squeeze him to the right as I almost make contact with Latifi ahead of me, and I am going to manage, the rear steps out a little bit there, but I am going to manage to go past Stroll, get myself up into P21. And I don't really know about anyone else who's played this game, but I am really struggling as I almost go wide there with very, very little grip. But I am really struggling to see anything in these full wet conditions. Literally the droplets of rain on the screen are a nightmare. Everything is completely blurry. It's making this really, really difficult to make any sort of headway or any sort of overtakes or just drive in a straight line, really. As talking of straight line, Stroll in a straight line eases past me, way too much speed for that Aston Martin that is a better car than we are. He gets up to P21 and I am rock bottom as he easily overtakes me. And speaking of overtakes, I can't even see where my teammate Jack is. He must have gone up to P17 or 16. So what a start for him. As we have a look at the start for the rest of the grid, Sergio Perez on pole. He gets off to a pretty poor start. Max Verstappen is level. He's more than level. He's ahead of him. So Max Verstappen gets off to a great start. He peels straight ahead of Sergio Perez, who's now under attack from Charles Leclerc. And then you've got Leclerc almost going past Perez, but Perez manages to hold on to P2. You've got the 2 Ferraris behind him, and then you've got George Russell trying to make a move down the inside of Carlos Sainz, but Lewis Hamilton manages to get round George Russell. You've then got the 2 McLarens behind them, and you've got the 2 Alpines behind them as Ocon tries to make the move down the inside of his teammate Alonso. I'm pretty sure Alonso qualified P8, so he's had a bit of a mare off the start. Ricciardo actually doing pretty well, getting himself up into P8 in place of him. And then we look at Mick Schumacher. He is wheel to wheel with Pierre Gasly as they go through the left-hander. Still wheel to wheel as we go back up. The Alpines are still wheel to wheel, I should say, as Ocon manages to get past Alonso, gets himself up into P9 as the rest of the grid seems to settle down. So Jack has in fact got himself up into P17, so unbelievable start for him. Latifi in P19 as someone looks like, I think it was Guan Yu Zhou, looked like he was going to try and make the move on Aitken but doesn't manage to get it done, as I am very much stone dead last in P22. And on to lap 4, you can see I am now 3 seconds behind Stroll, and I am struggling with grip. I go wide there. I am really struggling with grip. I've got absolutely nothing. I'm now almost 4 seconds behind Stroll, and I'm really struggling as well. I'm going to go through the chicane here. I'm not really able to take these chicanes with any level of speed either, so I'm also losing time. You'll see in the top left hand corner, I'm losing time coming out of that chicane as well. So yeah, really difficult in the wet. I'm really struggling. But one person who is not struggling is Max Verstappen. He's 1.2 seconds ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez, who is P2, with the 2 Ferraris in P3 and P4, and the 2 Mercedes P5 and P6 behind them, and then the 2 McLarens P7 and P8, with the 2 Alpines P9 and P10. So we've literally got the teams double stacked, the top 5 teams double stacked behind each other. I don't think I've ever seen that before. That's pretty cool. And Sebastian Vettel up into 16th. He's now 4.7 seconds ahead of my teammate Aikin, who is now struggling to keep Guan Yu Zhou behind him as the gap grows between him and Vettel in front. So hopefully these wet conditions, they've worked well for him off the line to get up to P17, but I'm going to hope they're going to work in his favour to try and keep that position from Guan Yu Zhou. As you can see me now, 3.3 seconds behind Lance Stroll. I am really struggling. Although on to lap 9, I'm starting to find some grip. I'm 2.4 seconds and I've gone wide in the exact same place again. So just as I say I'm trying to find some grip, I lose it completely. It's starting to lose the rear end just there as well as I try to get back onto the racing line. And I'm now 4.1 seconds behind Stroll. And with 2 laps left of this sprint, I think it's very obvious that I am going to be starting the race in P22. This has just been so difficult for me. I mean, Imola is not one of my favourite tracks to drive around. I do really struggle, but in these wet conditions, I just feel like I've got no grip. I feel like I can't see anything with the rain droplets on the screen. Yeah, it's pretty much been an absolute nightmare. I'm now 4.5 seconds behind Stroll. And on to lap 10, we've got a green flag. Has something happened here? We've got yellow flags on the side. Someone is off. It's Latifi. Latifi's out of the session. He was just on the left-hand side there, just out of view. So I said I was going to start P22. So long as I can finish this race, I will be in P21. And someone who will be starting P1 will be Max Verstappen. A great sprint race for him. Took the lead right off the line. He will come home to win the Imola sprint race with Sergio Perez just behind him in P2. The Ferraris are forced to take P3 and P4 for the first time this season with the 2 Mercedes behind them, and Lando Norris coming in P7, a familiar sight for him. Daniel Ricciardo doing well to get P8, and the 2 Alpines behind him making up the top 10. But as for me, thanks to a Latifi DNF, I will finish P21. Really difficult race for me, real struggle, and I'm going to start towards the back end of the grid on the last row. And to be honest, I think it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be a very difficult race. And I won't lie to you, overall, a pretty boring sprint race in the wet, I'm afraid. I was having problems getting anywhere near the car ahead of me, as you can see. It seems like the rest of the grid also felt the same thing too, struggling to make any sort of overtakes. But one man who was able to make a great overtake at the start of the race was Max Verstappen, getting the jump on his teammate Perez off the line, and that Red Bull has definitely had an effect. Those upgrades definitely having an effect, as they top the sprint. It's a 1-2 for them, with Charles Leclerc having to settle for P3 for the first time this season. The top 5 teams literally double stacked all the way down to 10th. I've never seen that before. And as for me, a shocker in my first sprint race. Just felt like I was driving on ice, no grip whatsoever, and just as I felt like I was starting to reel Stroll back in, I make a mistake and it's game over for me. At least Latifi didn't finish the race, so at least I will start ahead of him. And speaking of starting ahead, what a start for my teammate Jack Aitken. He took 3 positions and then held them. Well, I was going to say he held them for the entire race. He did in the end manage to get overtaken by Guan Yu Zhou, but maybe he heard my comments pre-race about us being a 1-horse team and thought he needed to do something about it. Who knows? But great for him, not so great for me. 18th and 21st for A&M Racing as we head over for the Imola Grand Prix.
Welcome once again to the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari. The clue's in the name. This is very much Ferrari home turf, and the locals will be out in force today to support their team in what we hope will be a magnificent spectacle of motorsport. On then to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. One lap of Imola, anti-clockwise of course, unlike most Formula One circuits, will take our drivers around 3.1 miles of track. 19 turns, 9 right-handers and 10 to the left. Drivers will need to be precise at the hairpin at turn 7, given the subsequent uphill section. Without a good exit from that corner, they'll lose a lot of time on that stretch. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. It's Sergio Perez on pole today, with Charles Leclerc alongside. Considering the rest of the grid, we have Sainz, Hamilton, George Russell and Norris, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda, Bottas, Mick Schumacher, Pierre Gasly and Fernando Alonso. They've taken a grid penalty. Vettel, Joe, Jack Aitken and Alex Albon, Ocon, Stroll, the rookie and Nicholas Latifi. Now it's almost time for lights out, so let's go down to the track. It's race day yet again, and joining me for a chat is Anthony Davidson. And our racers are certainly in for a rough day today. What will you be watching out for as they head into turn 1?
Well, the start of the race is always one of the most nerve-wracking parts. You have to hope that everyone is able to get off to a clean start, and this is possibly the trickiest part of the entire race. So many drivers in such a small space, and finding your braking point into turn 1 as well. It's a testament to the driver's skill that there aren't more incidents.
Despite qualifying and finishing in P1 in the sprint, Max Verstappen suffers a big penalty and pushes him right the way down to P11. Also, Fernando Alonso suffering the same fate as well. So Sergio Perez will line up on the grid in P1. As for us, down in P21, usual strategy, starting on the mediums, going to the hard midway through the race. Unfortunately for me, it's not wet today. It is overcast, but there isn't any sign of rain expected, so fingers crossed that will make the race a little bit easier for myself. But speaking of tyres, you'll see Albon and Latifi, the Williams have gone for the hard tyre strategy, so they're going to start on hards, presumably going to mediums midway through. So going to be interesting to see what sort of start they make, whether or not they can hold on to the rest of the grid when they make the tyre change later on. So hopefully this will allow me to get a little bit of distance between myself and Latifi as I come in quite hot there to park the car. Fortunately, I do manage to get a purple, so should be okay for the start. As we start the Imola Grand Prix, looks like Latifi a bit late to pull up. I think it was because I was a little bit fast going to park, but here we go. 4 red lights, 5 red lights for the Imola Grand Prix, and away we go. And it is a very, very good start off the line. I was going to have Stroll, but he's got too much speed, but I am now going to pass him as he has to put the brakes on in case he goes into the back of Albon. As now I go to the left of Albon, I go right the way down, and I am now level with my teammate, so close to making contact with Jack, but I forced myself into P16, go past Jack Aitken, who is now in P17. What an unbelievable start. Up into P16. I literally put the brakes so late on there. I don't really know how I didn't go into the back of someone, as I'm going to go and put the brakes on late again as we've got a yellow flag. Something's happened, I don't really know what, as I've squeezed, I think it's Gasly out, and now Stroll is out. So the safety car, no, not the safety car, the virtual safety car is out. So all hell has broken loose inside lap 1 as we're going to have a look to see how the rest of the grid got on. Perez off to a great start. Leclerc not too great. He is almost coming under attack from Hamilton. They're wheel to wheel going down into turn 1. Looks like Hamilton's going to have the inside line. It's going to be interesting to see which of those can get ahead. It will be it will be Charles Leclerc. We've got the McLarens of Norris and Daniel Ricciardo in 6th and 7. We're looking at Max Verstappen in 9th, all the way down as we go down the grid. Fernando Alonso up into 13th, Pierre Gasly down into 15th. You'll see here I make the dive on Pierre Gasly down the inside, up the hairpin, and managed now to take him up the hill, as now we've got Stroll out. So I don't really know what happened to Stroll there. He seemed to push Latifi wide. Don't really know, he tucked in behind him and just went straight into the back of him. Completely took the nose and the wheel off, and it is a disaster start for Stroll, who gets his second DNF in a row after after Australia. So for us, up to P15 now. Jack into P17. You've got Schumacher in P11. Tsunoda's managed to get himself into P10 in the final point scoring position. Max Verstappen up into P9. Ricciardo and Norris behind the top 5 of George Russell, Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton. Charles Leclerc has managed to keep Hamilton behind him. And Sergio Perez, who's about 0.7 seconds ahead of Charles Leclerc, as it looks like the virtual safety car is over and we can get started once again as Verstappen is all over the back of Kevin Magnussen. He's going to make the move. Surely they're going to be wheel to wheel going down the straight. Surely Verstappen is going to have the extra pace going into turn 1. I believe he is. We're now down and we're looking at Bottas as Bottas goes wide. He was trying to fight Alonso for P12. He's gone wide and that will allow me to go up into P14. So Bottas right the way down the order. He had a shocker in Australia and he's having another shocker here in Imola as Alonso goes up to P12 and Verstappen has indeed got ahead of Kevin Magnussen. No change at the top though, with Carlos Sainz in 4th, looks like Hamilton in 3rd, Charles Leclerc in 2nd, and Sergio Perez now 0.6 ahead of him in 1st position. So the Red Bull really working well after those updates. It's just such a shame that Max Verstappen got that penalty after finishing P1 in the sprint, but we've got another yellow flag as it's Perez. What is going on? The Red Bull, I was just saying the updates of the Red Bull were doing brilliantly for them, and Sergio Perez on lap 2 is now out of the race as Max Verstappen now tries to make the move on Daniel Ricciardo, and Daniel Ricciardo trying to make the move on Lando Norris. So only one Red Bull, and it's the Red Bull of Max Verstappen now in this race, and Charles Leclerc will go up into P1 as the 2 McLarens are wheel to wheel heading down into turn 1. It looks like Ricciardo's got the inside line heading down into turn 1, but we're 3 wide, the 2 McLarens and Verstappen, as it looks as though Ricciardo went slightly wide. He's going to get a poor exit, and Norris is going to be able to get ahead of him and remain in P5. And speaking of getting ahead, Yuki Tsunoda now up into P6. He looks like he's struggling with Schumacher right behind him, and he's got Alonso right up his tail in P11. So Alonso doing well to work his way back up as we work our way back up the grid. Carlos Sainz in 3rd, Lewis Hamilton 2nd, Charles Leclerc 0.5 seconds ahead of him in 1st. So pretty crazy start to the race on lap 5. And speaking of crazy, Vettel is now off. The same place that Ricciardo went wide, the same place that Bottas went wide, Vettel is now off, and he will tumble down the grid and we will go up the grid. We are now in P13. So a track that is not particularly good for me, I am now doing brilliantly. So these starts in these races, I really seem to be getting some good starts. I'm now up to P13, so it's just whether or not I can hold on to it, as we are on lap 6. I'm 1.2 seconds ahead of Gasly, 2.8 ahead of Ocon, going round this corner as I go onto the grass, and I've spun it. Oh, I've had an absolute disaster. I was just saying I was having such a good start to this race, and I've had a shocker. I've gone wide, found my rear tyres onto the grass, lost grip, spun it, gone into the gravel, and I am down now in P20. I am last in the race thanks to Perez and Stroll going out, and I'm really struggling now that I was on the gravel, really struggling to get any sort of grip, as now I go round the left hairpin and I've lost the rear again. Oh my word, this is a disaster. I am so lucky not to go careering into that wall just then. I don't know how I kept that from going into the wall, but absolute disaster for me. From P13 I have tumbled down to P20, and I am now 10.6 seconds behind Sebastian Vettel, who also went right into turn 2. So disaster really for me. It's just been, it's not been a great start. I was just saying how Imola is really, I was just saying how I was doing a really good job here, but it's really not one of my favourite tracks, and I'm proving that now with an absolute disaster start. And speaking of disaster, Jack, my teammate, getting overtaken by Alexander Albon on the hard tyre, so he's doing really well. He's got himself up to P14 on the hard tyre, and it looks like those hard tyres have really come to him now, as Jack on the mediums can't even do anything to defend and is now struggling with Bottas behind him. So Alexander Albon having a great start, but someone who's not had a great start is Ricciardo. Ricciardo on lap 9 is out of the Grand Prix. So the 4th Grand Prix in a row, Daniel Ricciardo having problems. I think he was P7, P8, looks like Verstappen had overtaken him just as he went round the hairpin. But Ricciardo, don't really know what it was. Maybe it's a mechanical issue, maybe it's a gearbox problem, I don't know. But he is now out, and Lando Norris is the only McLaren in the race now, as he's just been overtaken by Verstappen into P5. So really, really bad couple of laps there for McLaren as going up the grid. Lewis Hamilton now in P2. Charles Leclerc not having the same success as he did in Australia. He's struggling to get ahead of the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton and also his teammate Carlos Sainz. He's only 0.4 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton. And speaking of Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, both of them jump into the pits, P15, and it looks as though Charles Leclerc has had a poor pit stop, and he has, and Hamilton has jumped him in the pit, so he couldn't get away from him in the race, and now things have gone from bad to worse as he's now fallen behind Lewis Hamilton. So he's had a shocker in the pits, and I'm hoping I don't have a shocker in the pits as I come in lap 15, turning in now. I managed to get an optimal turn in, so happy days for me. Let's hope my pit crew can do a good job. They do a good job. I'm now onto the hard tyre, and it's going to be a long remainder of this race for me. So a decent pit stop, but to be honest, I'm so far behind everyone else, I don't really think it makes much of a difference if I have a good pit stop, because I can't really see myself doing anything in this race. I've got Ocon, who's on the softs. He's 19.7 seconds ahead of me. I'm not really sure what happened to Ocon, why he's had to go onto the softs and why he's down in 18th. Maybe he made some contact with someone earlier in the race, I do not know, or maybe it was just a poor strategy call from Alpine. But for me, 20.8 seconds now behind Ocon as I'm struggling to get any grip on these hard tyres, and it is just going from bad to worse for me. I'm really struggling here as we watch Carlos Sainz and George Russell come out of the pits on lap 16, and Carlos Sainz looks like he has got ahead of Lewis Hamilton. So the overcut for Carlos Sainz has worked as he now finds himself in P1, Lewis Hamilton in P2, and Ferrari have done the old switcheroo. So Carlos Sainz in P1 and Leclerc is now in P3 with George Russell right up the back of him. And speaking of a Mercedes right up the back of a Ferrari, Hamilton is right up the back of Carlos Sainz. So whether or not on the cold hard tyre, Carlos Sainz up the hill can keep the position I should say from Hamilton. I'm getting too excited, and there's reason, because Sainz has gone wide and Lewis Hamilton has taken the lead of this Grand Prix. This is insane. So much action here in Imola as the Mercedes now of Lewis Hamilton goes into P1, Sainz and Leclerc P2 and P3, and George Russell in P4. But how long can he hold on for? I don't think he will be able to hold on for too much longer as lap 18, Hamilton and Carlos Sainz fighting for P1, and Carlos Sainz gets the position back from Lewis Hamilton. So that Ferrari is definitely quicker than the Mercedes now that he's managed to warm up those hard tyres, and Carlos Sainz retakes the lead of the Imola Grand Prix. So Ferrari and Mercedes are 1-2 and a 3-4 as we now watch Alexander Albon on lap 19 coming out of the pits as Jack, my teammate, struggling to hold on. He goes tumbling down to P17, overtaken by Sebastian Vettel. He's doing his best to try and hold on, but Vettel is eventually going to be able to take the position from him. So Jack, after a decent start, starting to fall down the grid. And as for myself, I am now only 3.4 seconds behind him. You can see I've actually overtaken Ocon, who's had to go back into the pits onto the medium tyre. So definitely Ocon, either a strategy mistake or some sort of contact has cost him there. So I'm now up into P18 and my teammate in P17. So not a particularly good race for us so far, as I'm now closing the gap on him due to him fighting with Vettel. So yeah, a bit of a disaster for us here in Imola on lap 19. We are really struggling, but someone who's not struggling is Alexander Albon. He's on the medium tyre here, and he's trying now to get Guan Yu Zhou into P13. So the strategy for Williams of going hard to medium is clearly working for them, as Pierre Gasly up into P10, Mick Schumacher diving into the pits from P9, so he's going to go tumbling down the order. Fernando Alonso in P8, Yuki Tsunoda has got himself up into P7, so great race for him, his best race of the season so far for AlphaTauri, but he is 14 seconds behind Lando Norris in P6. who's a further 4.2 seconds behind Max Verstappen, who's 5.4 seconds behind George Russell. And this four-way battle at the top between Carlos Sainz, Hamilton, Leclerc and Russell is really continuing as we go to the battle between Albon and Guan Yu Zhou. Guan Yu Zhou managing to hold on. Albon's going to go for a second bite of the cherry, switches between the inside and the outside. He has to tuck in again behind Guan Yu Zhou, but surely Albon on that medium tyre, it's only going to be a matter of time before he's able to make the move on Guan Yu Zhou. And now we are following again my teammate, lap 21, and he has Latifi right up the back of him. He's up to P15, so I'm not sure whether or not he managed to overtake Latifi, whether it was on track or in the pits, I'm not too sure. But Latifi now going to cut to the right-hand side. He's going to make the move, he's going to ride the curb, but he manages to get the better exit. And Jack again gets overtaken, this time by Nicholas Latifi. And this has actually helped me, to be fair, because I'm able to close the gap to 0.6 seconds behind Jack. But to be honest, I'm not really that fussed about trying to catch my teammate. I obviously want us to both get as high up the grid as we possibly can, but it's not a particularly good day at the office for either of us, as Ocon is now 1.7 seconds behind me, so he's closing the gap on those medium tyres, and Schumacher a further 7.6 behind him. So again, Schumacher, he's on medium, so whether he had a problem I don't know, as Jack tried to go down the inside into turn 1. He's wheel to wheel with Nicholas Latifi, and Latifi running wide. I've got the inside line, I go down the left hand side, I have to brake early. Bottled it again a little bit there. I maybe could have been a little bit more aggressive, as there's 3 wide now going into the left hairpin as I'm right behind my teammate, and Ocon is now only 0.6 seconds behind me. So this battle between the 3 of us going up the hills really allowed Ocon to close the gap between us, as Jack and Latifi wheel to wheel all the way round this lap. Unbelievable, as Aitken now has to settle in as I'm right behind. What has just happened? What has just happened? Unbelievable. I was literally looking as if I was about to go around my teammate, and I have just been taken out. I have just been taken out by Ocon. That is ridiculous. Completely lost my nose, completely lost my front wing, and my front wheel, sorry. And Ocon, unbelievable. He is completely taken me out there, and I am out of the race. Terminal damage, and it's my second DNF of the season. I am forced to retire from the session, and that is unbelievable. Things go from bad to worse for me. I was having a shocker of a race, and it just got even worse. Unbelievable.
And here's our winner, pulling their Ferrari into Parc Ferme after a fantastic race. Well, Anthony Davidson, a resounding victory today, but what set them apart from the rest?
Well, they certainly stood out as a driver with tons of confidence on the track. I think their ability to keep their cool, even during some of the more hectic parts of the race, meant they were able to capitalise on the mistakes of other drivers, giving them the opportunity to make their way to the top spot with ease.
Here come our winners now, a thrilling race and a tremendous effort by Ferrari. Their history is well known, so it's no surprise to fans the world over to see them come out on top once again.
So that is it. Carlos Sainz picks up the win for Ferrari as they continue their dominance, winning every race so far. Good to see the 2 Mercs up on the podium with him. Charles Leclerc can only settle for 4th place, so somewhere along the line Russell must have overtaken him, but obviously we were not able to see that. It still puts him 1 place above Verstappen, who is the only Red Bull to finish after heartbreak for Perez on lap 2. Got pole, leading the race, and it was all over for him just like that. But Tsunoda, look at Tsunoda, P7 for him, and AlphaTauri will definitely be moving above us in the Constructors' Championship after a double points finish for them. Pierre Gasly in P9, I did think it was only a matter of time, and that is in fact the case. As for me, another day to forget. Poor Quali, and then it all seemed to be going great. I think I was up to P12, P13 at one point, but then in a flash, one mistake sent me tumbling down the order, and just when I was starting to maybe think about recovering, Ocon takes me completely out of the race, making it my second DNF in a row and my second of the season. As for Jack, P17, beaten by the two Williams. Albon actually up to P12. What a drive for him, and showing that the call to start on hards actually wasn't a bad one at all. So let's see what impact that's had on the standing. Sainz cuts Leclerc's lead at the top to just 17 points, and the championship is starting to look more and more like a two-horse race for the prancing horses, no pun intended. Two Red Bulls splitting Hamilton and Russell in P3 and P6. Points for Tsunoda pushes me down to 12th, and Ricciardo has only scored 1 point this season. I didn't realise he was actually doing that badly. As for the constructors, Ferrari still have a commanding lead at the top, but Mercedes take second spot from Red Bull after their double podium today. McLaren pretty much propped up by Lando Norris, starting to pull away in that fourth place battle, and I think Alpine need to make some serious engine upgrades if they want to start clawing that one back, or maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just some wishful thinking on my part. AlphaTauri, they jump above us after a good day at the office for them, as we somehow continue to stay above Aston Martin and Williams, but for how much longer? Anyway, if you have enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe. I'm going to be going through the entire career mode and aiming to get episodes out every few days, so there'll be plenty more content to come. Thanks very much for watching.